saranang gacchami Dhammang saranang gacchami Sanghang saranang gacchami Sunyo lokoti bhante uchati Kittavatānuko bhante sunyo lokoti uchati. Bhante, the world is empty. The world is empty is said. In what way, in what sense the world is empty? Asked Venerable Ananda from the Buddha. Then the Buddha said, Attenava attanyenava sunyo tasma sunyo lokoti uchati. The world is empty with self or anything pertaining to self. Therefore, the world is empty, the Buddha said. Friends, this is how the Buddha defined what not self is, what empty is. So today, as it is the third day for the retreat, for this Dhamma talk, our topic is what is not self. Since this is a retreat for 3 characteristics of existence, you all listen to the first 2 characteristics yesterday and day before. Today is this topic. What is not self? Anatta. Anatta means either not self or non-self. So, I think before we talk about not self, it is much better, much easier and more comprehensible, palatable and digestible to understand what self is, because it is more clear, more comprehensible. So, if we understand what is self first. What is self? Self means a permanent entity, permanent thing, a substance, something eternal, something everlasting. That is what is called self. The Pali term for self is Atta. Its Sanskrit form is Atma or Atman. So, soul or self are the same. Either soul or self. Self means whenever you write the word self, it's always with S capital. That means soul. So, soul is a fundamental teachings of all religions. Without soul or without self, no religion. Like Hinduism, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, all these religions, they talk about self. In this sense, Buddhism is not a religion. As long as you believe a self, you have to believe God. So if you do not believe a soul or self, you do not believe God. Then no religion. So it is necessary to understand clearly that this particular thing, soul or self, as it is a belief, it is emanated from the heaven, from the Creator. And eventually it is reunified with the same God, same Creator. That is the teaching. That is how we to understand according to that teaching, according to religions. So then it is the same self that transmigrates from birth to birth, providing us rebirth. It is because of self. That is how the teaching is. It is not Buddhism. It is not what the Buddha said. But according to that teaching, it transmigrates from birth to birth, providing us rebirth. It is the same soul, according to Bhagavad Gita, the holy book of Hinduism. It is said, there is no birth, no death for soul or self. Na jayate, na mriyate va kadachit. Never. It never happens. No birth, no death for soul or self. And not only that, it is said in the same source, it is said, na hanyate hanyamane sarire. Even though your body is slain, body is destroyed, soul is not destroyed. Soul is everlasting. Self is everlasting. That is how it is explained. The Buddha in the Dhammapada talk about Atta, self. In the Dhammapada, there is a chapter called Atta Vagga. The chapter named Atta. Same spelling, same sounds, same pronunciation. Atta, but completely different meaning. Some people have mistaken this, misinterpreted this, mistranslated this. Even some scholars, they have mistranslated, misinterpreted this as the Buddha is talking about self with big S, self. No. According to the teachings of the Buddha, no such things. Buddha's teaching is very clear. Very clear. Now, in the Dhammapada chapter, this particular chapter, Buddha says, Attahi attano nato, you are your master. Attahi attano nato, you are your master. Again, he says, Attanava katang papang, attana sankilissati. One is defiled because of one's evil deed. Attana akatam papang, attana visujjati. One is purified because of one's purified actions, not done evil deeds. So here the Atta means self. That's true. That's oneself. It is oneself. It is not oneself, but oneself. Like you yourself should do, I myself should do, he himself should do, like that. Even grammatically we use this. We have to understand these differences. When we use grammar, when we use our language, we have to use the term self. I myself went there. He himself came here. That self and the self with big S is completely different. These differences are to be understood clearly. So the Buddha talk about self, yourself. It is not the big S, not the little one inside permanently dwelling inside and going from birth to birth, giving you a rebirth. No such thing in the teachings of the Buddha. That is what is called not self, non-self, anatta, unatta, no atta in the teachings of the Buddha. Buddha attained full enlightenment and he sat on the same seat for 1 week, enjoying the bliss, being sensitive to the bliss of enlightenment. He spent 1 week, and after that he wanted to understand the world. He did a survey. Mentally he observed the world to understand the nature of beings. Buddha understood these beings, these humans. Buddha called to this body, this aggregates, Buddha named it as a disease. These 5 aggregates are like a disease. Dukkha. This is roga. The Pali term is roga. This is like a disease, like a dart, like a boil, like that. Buddha gave different terms for this aggregates. So Buddha said, this is a disease. After he surveyed, he said, Ayang loko santapa jato. This world is full of unsatisfactoriness, full of suffering. Ayang loko santapa jato. Phassa pareto. Afflicted by contact. Phassa pareto. Afflicted by contact. Rogang vadati attato. These humans, they call this disease atta. They call it and they take this aggregates as atta. Atta means self, as self. So it is the nature of these humans. We all take these aggregates as atta, self. That is the first thing he understood. So, in this manner, all of us take this as myself. This is myself. This form is myself. Self is my form. Form is in myself. Self is in my form. In this manner, 4 ways we grasp this form. And then feeling. This feeling is myself. This self is my feeling. Feeling is in myself. Self is in my feeling. 4 ways. Then perception and consciousness as well. 5 aggregates in 4 ways. Means 5 multiplied by 4. 20 different ways we grasp it. Grasp these 5 aggregates as mine, me, myself. With that, we cling to these 5 aggregates. No release. No release, no liberation. This is what is called personality belief, self-identity. As long as we have this self-identity, sakkaya ditti, personality belief, we cannot attain enlightenment. we cannot come to the path as a stream enterer. In order to come to the path as a stream enterer, we have to cut off this fetter. This is called fetter. There are 10 fetters. Of the 10, this is the first one. So friends, this is how the Buddha saw that all humans talk about self and they all are quite entangled with self. In the time of the Buddha, people, some scholars, debaters especially, they formulated 10 different questions and put this question to the Buddha. Quite difficult questions to answer. They went to the Buddha and asked these different questions. 10 questions. Buddha understood these 10 questions are quite irrelevant. Irrelevant for the purpose. What is the purpose? Purpose of liberation. For the liberation, for the disenchantment, for the dispassion, for the cessation, for peace, for the enlightenment, for complete liberation. These 10 questions are not relevant. Since they are irrelevant, not relevant, Buddha kept silent whenever they asked these questions. One day, a certain monk, while practicing meditation, he wanted to know these 10 questions. He wanted to get the answers from the Buddha. He went to the Buddha and asked why the Buddha did not answer these questions. He said, if the Buddha knows this, let me know this. If the Buddha don't know this, tell me that Buddha does not know this. Like that, he wanted to know these 10 questions. The 10 questions are, when the people, such debaters, whenever they went to the Buddha, they asked these 10 questions. They asked whether the world is eternal. Then the Buddha kept silence. Whether the world is not eternal. Then whether the world is infinite. Buddha kept silent. Whether the world is finite. Kept silent. Then asked whether the soul, the self, whether the self and form are two different things. Buddha kept silent. Whether the form and self the same. Buddha kept silent. Then further they asked, referring to the Arahant, the enlightened one's death and after death, whether the enlightened one is born, will be born after death, will not be born after death, will be born or will not be born after death, or neither will be born nor not will be born after death. These 10 questions were asked. Buddha kept silence as all those are quite irrelevant for the purpose, for the realization of Nibbana. So my point here is, according to this, they believe there is a soul or self. Of course, before the Buddha, in that society, people believed that there is a permanent entity to be called self or soul. So, even in these 10 questions, they ask whether the self and form are two different things, or self and form are the same. That is the point. So, in this manner, they ask different questions. The Buddha gave us very important discourses, several discourses referring to the characteristics to understand the nature of self and selflessness. There is one particular discourse in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length sayings of the Buddha. The name of the sutta is 6 Sets of 6. This is a very important discourse to understand selflessness. 6 Sets of 6, where the Buddha pointed out how self is coming to be. In other words, the origination of self, the origination of personality belief. The Buddha said, whenever one takes this I as mine, me, myself, like this I is mine, this I am, or me, this I is myself. Then form is mine, form I am, form is myself. Then consciousness, I consciousness is mine, I consciousness I am, I consciousness is myself. That's how, when we take like this, in this manner, we develop, we arouse this concept of self. So in this, and the Buddha talk about self. So whenever we grasp these aggregates as mine, me, myself, we develop this idea of permanent thing, permanent entity, substance. We think that it is everlasting. That is how the Buddha taught here. So friends, now let's come to understand what is not self. The Buddha, as I said earlier, in the Dhammapada, the Buddha very clearly said, you are your master. Self, in this case, in the Dhammapada, we never find a place, a trace, iota of place, thing that the Buddha has taught about permanent thing, permanent entity. No substance at all. It's very clear. Buddha's constant teaching was that yada niccang tang dukkang, yada niccang anicca. Buddha's teaching is anicca, no nicca things. Nicca means permanent thing. No nicca. Buddha instead taught us anicca, no nicca, impermanent. He clearly said, yada niccang tang dukkang, whatever is anicca, whatever is in the nature of impermanence, it is dukkha. Yada niccang tang dukkang. And then said, whatever is in the nature of changing, impermanence, unsatisfactory, it is without a self, anatta, without a self. In this manner, Buddha taught us these 3 characteristics of existence. These 3 characteristics are anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and soullessness, selflessness. These are the main teachings, fundamental teachings of the Buddha. Mainly the Buddha, on that day, that night of course, when he attained full enlightenment, he realized three different principles. He realized the four noble truths in the world. Then, secondly, he realized the dependent origination. The third, he realized these three characteristics of existence. These three characteristics, three marks are in all things in the world. Whenever we see things as they are, we see these three characteristics. If you see these three characteristics, you penetrate things, you know that what to call vipassana, passati to see, vipassati to see true. You penetrate, you see the real nature of things. So these teachings, the Buddha taught this Dhamma in his very first discourse. After his attainment of enlightenment, 2 months after, he delivered his first sermon. When he delivered his first sermon, he talked about the whole teaching. He gave the gist of all teaching. His whole teaching to be discussed in his rest of his life. He gave this in his first discourse. At the end of the discourse, what happened? As he gave this talk to 5 disciples, the 5 disciples couldn't understand this properly. Even though they were practicing with the Buddha, while they were practicing austerities, they were practicing with the Buddha. Even though the Buddha taught this Dhamma, at the end, only one person understood this Dhamma. Venerable Kontanya. He understood whatever is in the nature of arising, it is in the nature of perishing. Yang kinchi samudaya dhammang, sabbang tang nirodha dhammang. That is called Dhamma eye, Dhamma chakku, Dhamma eye. He got that eye. He got that knowledge, that vision, that wisdom. With that, he became a stream enterer. And others, they could not understand. Why? They were Brahmins. They believed that there is a little one inside, permanently dwelling inside, the little one called S-O-U-L. Soul or self. As long as you believe this, as long as you think that there is a permanent thing in the world, we cannot understand, cannot come to the path as a stream enterer. Why? There is something permanent. If there is something permanent, you cannot say that everything is impermanent. You to understand everything is impermanent. Everything is unsatisfactory. Everything is without a self. You to understand, you to realize these 3 characteristics. Then only, and only then you can understand. Only then you can come to the path as a stream enterer. That is why we have to understand this clearly. The Buddha very clearly said, stream enterer can be seen only this ministry, only this order. Once returner can be seen only this dispensation, only this order. Non-returner can be seen here only this dispensation. And the Arahant can be seen only this dispensation. Very clearly said. If you want to read this, you can read Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length saints, Chula Sihanada Sutta, lesser discourse on Sihanada, Lion's Roar discourse. Buddha very clearly said this. And even in the last days of the Buddha, he said this. Before his passing away, a certain monk came to see the Buddha and he asked questions. Subhadda, the name Subhadda. Then the Buddha said the same thing. So it is clear, if you believe self or soul, no release, because there is a permanent entity. So the Buddha delivered this first sermon, and of the 5 disciples, only one person attained this first stage, which is called stream entry, and others could not understand because they believe that there is a permanent entity, there is a soul, self within. Then what happened? Buddha had to, right after the Buddha had to give another discourse, which is characteristics of non-self. Characteristics of non-self. Anatta Lakhana Sutta. Characteristics of non-self. Where, addressing the monks, 5 monks, the Buddha said directly, monks, this form is not self. Directly he said, monks, this form is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Volitional formations are not self. Consciousness is not self. Like that, Buddha taught the characteristics of not self. Buddha then started to question them. Whatever is in the nature of arising, it is in the nature of perishing. Buddha asked whether this form is permanent or impermanent. Question. Then they replied, impermanent, Bhante. Then asked whether whatever is impermanent, whether it is satisfactory or unsatisfactory. They said, Bhante, unsatisfactory. Then asked whether what is impermanence, unsatisfactory, whether whether it can be taken as this is mine, this is me, this is myself. Then they said, no, Bhante. So if you take this as mine, me, myself, that is how you think that it is permanent. This is mine. Mine permanently. Me, myself permanently. In such a way, grasp as mine, as self, as soul. So the Buddha taught them this sutta, and at the end they all became enlightened ones. With that, in the world there were 6 arahants together with the Buddha. So friends, in this manner, the Buddha taught us what is not self. According to the Rahula Sutta of Numerical Discourses, chapter 4, Buddha said, Rahula, whenever a bhikkhu, whenever a practitioner understands recognizes that there is no permanent thing to be called atta, permanent thing, or anything pertaining to that. Not only atta, not only self. If you believe anything which is pertaining, which is belonging to self, that itself is wrong. So the Buddha said, in the world there is no such thing called self or which belongs to self. If one sees this, if one recognizes this thing in the four elements, Buddha said to Rahula, his son, Buddha said, if one recognizes this in four elements, what are the four elements? Earth, water, fire and air. In these, if you see something permanent, you do not see reality. If you see that there is nothing permanent, there is nothing substance, nothing eternal in these four elements, Buddha said, to this itself, he has cut off his craving, he has stripped off his all fetters, and destroyed his conceit and come to full enlightenment. Because of understanding reality as it is. As I said at the very outset of this talk, one day Venerable Ananda went to the Buddha and he asked, Bhante, this emptiness, empty is the world is said. Bhante, with what the world is empty? The Buddha very clearly said, Attenava, Attanyenava. The world is empty with self and with what is pertaining to self, what belongs to self. Self and what is belonging to self, it is empty. That is why it is called empty. It's very clear. That is the Buddha's definition. Attenava, attanyenava, sunyo. Very clear. One day, while the Buddha was giving a Dhamma talk, he got some cow dung, dried cow dung to his fingernail, like this, little cow dung, showing that. The Buddha said, monks, even this much thing in the world, even this much thing, we do not find permanent thing, even this much. In the world, no permanent thing even of this much. That is the Buddha's teaching. Another discourse named Asutavantu, uninstructed persons. Uninstructed person is the normal person who does not know clearly the Dhamma, who has not seen the enlightened ones, noble ones, who has not followed the enlightened ones, not heard the Dhamma from them, like that. The worldly person, uninstructed worldlings, that is how it is said. Such a person Buddha said, such a person thinks that this mind is my soul. mind is myself. That is how they think. It's true, this body is changing, yes, but mind? Even today, some people think that, why? Mind is going from birth to birth. So it's permanent. That is how people say. They argue. Even they argue. Mind is going from birth to birth. It is because of mind that we are born again and again. So therefore mind is permanent. They grasp mind instead body. The Buddha said, monks, it is better they take this body as permanent, not the mind. Because it is clear that the body lasts longer than mind. Body lasts as we live for many years, like 50, 60, 100 years even. So it lasts longer. The mind is the fastest thing in the world. That is why it is called fastest energy. It's so rapidly changing, mind. Therefore we cannot take mind as ourself. If we can't take the body, Buddha said, it is better they take body as soul, rather taking this mind. It's again clear, the Buddha's definition, Buddha's clarification is very clear. No such thing. That is why it is said, not self. Not self. Buddha taught this, not self, as a contemplation, as a method of meditation. Buddha taught us to practice this as a method of meditation. Once, Venerable Girimananda was sick, afflicted, gravely ill. Then Venerable Ananda went to the Buddha and said, Bhante, Venerable Girimananda is sick, gravely ill. If Bhante would visit him, it would be better now. It would be nice if Bhante would visit him. Then the Buddha said, Ananda, you better learn the 10 types of perception and go to him and chant this, recite these 10 perceptions and practice this. Let the monks to practice this 10 different perceptions. Where the Buddha gave 10 different perceptions to practice. These are called Dasa Sanya. Sanya means perception. 10 perception. Of the 10, the first one is Anicca. Anicca Sanya. It is to be practiced. It is to be contemplated. Where the second one, the Buddha said, Anatta Sanya. Second one is Anatta Sanya. Anatta means not self. Not self is to be contemplated upon whenever possible. The Buddha said, whenever you go to the woods to practice, whenever you go to forest to practice, or to a foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, empty place, you better practice this Anatta Sanya. How to practice Anatta Sanya? Buddha said, give attention to your body. Understand this form is not myself. Feeling is not myself. Perception is not myself. Volitional formations are not myself. Consciousness is not myself. Then what is yourself? Where is yourself? Like that, We can observe these 5 aggregates even. Even there are different methods of meditation, such as 6 sets of 6. When you practice this, you can give attention to your eye, and you can say, my eye is not myself, this eye is not myself, form is not myself, eye consciousness is not myself, eye contact is not myself, feeling is not myself, craving is not myself, like that, through eye. 6 different things through eye. Then ear. This ear is not myself, sound is not myself, ear consciousness is not myself, ear contact is not myself, ear feeling is not myself, ear craving is not myself. Then the nose, the tongue, the body and the mind the same. Like that, we can contemplate upon this. That is for the meditation, for the understanding clearly that there is no self here. No self. It's empty. In this manner, we can understand this. One day, Venerable Radha, a monk named Radha, he went to the Buddha and he asked, Bhante, this not self is said. What is Bhante, not self? Again the Buddha said, referring to these 5 aggregates. You see, the Buddha's teaching is based on these 5 aggregates. Buddha very clearly said the dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, the origination of dukkha, the cessation of dukkha, and the path leading to the cessation of dukkha. These are the 4 noble truths, central teachings of the Buddha. Whole teachings based on these 5 aggregates. We all have to understand the whole Dhamma within these 5 aggregates. Therefore the Buddha said, this, what is not self, means this form is not self. Feeling is not self. Perception is not self. Volitional formations are not self. And consciousness is not self. Another occasion, Buddha said, Sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things. What are conditioned things? Things are conditioned. Things are depending on other things, which is called interdependently. Things exist interdependently. Things are conditioned by other things. All conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara anicca. Then he said, Yada panyaya passyati. If one sees this true wisdom, atta nibbindati dukkhe, then he turns away from suffering. Turns away from suffering. Esa maggo visuddhya. This is the path to purity. So, sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. Then, sabbe sankhara dukkha. Secondly, he said, sabbe sankhara dukkha. All conditioned things are dukkha, unsatisfactory as well. Whatever is changing, it is unsatisfactory. It is unsatisfactory. That is the nature. So, when things are changing, if we cannot understand what happens, we grasp things as mine. If we cannot understand things as mine, as changing, we simply grasp this and then we have to suffer. That is what has happened. So the Buddha said, whatever is changing, it is in the nature of unsatisfactory. And thirdly, said, all dhammas are anatta. That is a bit different thing. All dhammas are anatta, sabbe dhamma anatta. Anatta, no self. All dhammas are without a self. Without a self. What are these dhamma? These are the things to be understood. These dhammas are, Buddha said, these dhammas are, whether the Buddhas appear or do not appear, these dhammas are there in the world. You know, the Dhamma taught by the Buddha, they are in the world, whether the Buddhas appear or do not appear. Uppadava tathagatanang, anuppadava tathagatanang, thitava sa dhatu dhamma thitata. This established condition of Dhamma, this fixed law of Dhamma is ever lasting there in the world, whether the Buddhas appear or do not appear. The Buddha fully enlightens to this Dhamma, and thereafter he expounds this Dhamma, explains this Dhamma, announces this Dhamma. What are these Dhamma? The Buddha taught us the Dhammas in the 6 sets of 6, the Sutta, 6 sets of 6, 6 sets of 6. Again, the 36 factors. 36 factors are based on these 5 aggregates and 6 bases. Through six bases, we can see 6 different points, 6 different things. That is how perception takes place. I, form, consciousness, feeling and craving. Ear, sound, consciousness, contact, feeling and craving. Like that, 6 multiplied by 6, 36. In these 36 places, we never see permanent thing, no self in this Dhamma. Right after his attainment and enlightenment, Buddha said, Buddha contemplated upon the dependent origination. You know, in the dependent origination there are 12 links. Buddha contemplated upon this in the progress way and regress way. And he said, these conditioned things, this Dhamma, atapino jayato brahmanas. The Brahmana means the Buddha. When the Buddha was practicing the Dhamma ardently, he realized this Dhamma. The Buddha said, this Dhamma, in this Dhamma, One cannot see permanent things. These are interdependently existing, in which you do not see a self. Again, in this Dhamma, again, you do not see the permanent entity to be called self or soul. One day, a student went to the Buddha and asked Bhante, how should one see the world so that one is not to be seen by Mara? How should one see the world so that one is not to be seen by Mara? Then the Buddha said, Sunyato lokang avekkassu Mogaraja sada sato. His name was Mogaraja. Buddha said, Mogaraja, be mindful all the time. Sada sato, be mindful all the time. Then sunyato lokang avekkassu, see the world as empty. Now emptiness is said. What is emptiness? Emptiness means, keep this in your mind. According to the teachings of the Buddha, emptiness means empty with the self or anything pertaining to self. Empty with the self or which is pertaining to self. That is why it is, according to the Buddha, that is why it is said empty. So the Buddha said, see this world as empty. No self, no thing pertaining to self. Sunyato lokang avekkassu. Mogaraja sada satu. Then attanu ditting uhacca. Uproot the view of atta, view of self. Uproot it. Evam machu tarosya. Then you will go beyond Mara. Then you will go beyond Mara. That means deathless. You will go beyond death. Deathlessness. Deathlessness is birthlessness as well. That is the teaching of the Buddha. Deathlessness is what is called enlightenment, what is called liberation. That is the purpose of the teachings of the Buddha, to show us right liberation. Right liberation is possible only with right knowledge. Right knowledge means the knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. Right knowledge can be gained only with right concentration. Right concentration is gained only with the practice of the first 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. With the support of the first 7 factors, right concentration is gained, then right concentration, right knowledge, which leads to right liberation. This is the way. This is the teachings of the Buddha. Let's all understand this Dhamma, these wonderful teachings of the Buddha. Let's understand these 3 characteristics of existence theoretically and try to realize, try to penetrate ourselves so that we can realize real peace, real happiness of Nibbana. May we realize real peace, real happiness of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.